Something good that I've noticed is that many more people, it seems, are noticing what's being called the war on masculinity or an emasculation agenda. And this has been mainly focused on entertainment, like TV shows, movies, and music, including the music videos, wherein basically men are portrayed in a more feminine way, and this is shown as if it's normal. So it's the normalization of the feminization or the emasculation of men. And some actors and famous comedians have talked about how they were asked to wear dresses, very forcefully, and how that seems to be a very common intention of those that are putting together scripts for, said TV shows and movies and whatever it is, a comedy skit on a TV show or what have you. So that's all very good that people are taking note of this. What I realize, though, is that this goes back much further in time than just, recent years. It may seem hyper accelerated, and I suppose it is hyper accelerated. It is fair to say that through the means of technology now, through the internet especially. But this has been an old agenda. And so the two insights I'd like to offer here are, one, just how far back it goes, and how it relates to Christianity, and some words attributed to Jesus that are extremely well known. It seems like everyone has heard the words "turn the other cheek" to that and expose that to be a purposeful mistranslation. But also a missing main insight, along with the historic nature of this, or the longevity of this agenda, is the basic purpose of it and the main people that are perpetuating it, the main people that are carrying out this agenda. It's basically what you could say are the powers that be, or the ruling classes of the world, or the ruling class of the world. Particularly governments and states, historically and currently. So it's not a complicated strategy. It's simply seeking more power and control by undermining the masculinity of the men in the population that they're trying to control. So it's just very straightforward. It's just like disarming someone. Abusers want to disarm people first, because then it's easier to abuse and control them. Like a slave master isn't going to let all the slaves, have weapons, because then the slaves could easily rebel, defend themselves, and get out of that situation. So it's very simple reasoning on the part of the control freak. So taking away a man's masculinity is actually, like you could say, disarmament within, right? Like you can disarm a man physically, like take away a sword or a gun. But if you feminize his thinking, you, in a sense, disarm him mentally, meaning that you take away his natural instincts to be a protector, or you could say even a warrior. So by feminizing men in a population, that population becomes much more easily controllable. It's very simple, and yet I hear almost nobody emphasizing this point, even though that's the main reason why it's going on. I think people today just don't recognize that there is this, order wherein the people at the top now and historically have been set on treating people like livestock. And again, you want to tame the quote unquote animals so that they're easily controllable, right? Just like with actual animals, right? They say break the horse, or, otherwise domesticate the animal. Otherwise, they're too, so they would say they're too unruly, they're too wild and not as easily manageable, right? So that's the main reason why this emasculation, feminization agenda is going on. Yes, it breaks up families, but that's part and parcel to the same agenda, which is gaining more power and control. Because if you have strong families, then you have, individuals that are not in a position of dependence on the powers that be, on the system. You have strong families, strong communities. That's problematic to those that, again, want to just control and manage humans like livestock. So in modern terminology, we could say this is just pure Marxism, that's straight out of the Communist Manifesto, to destroy the family unit. But again, the agenda is one and the same. It's to gain more power for the state. Because if you break up the family, people are more easily controllable. It's really that simple. So the whole feminization of men and masculinization of women also breaks up the family, because it creates disharmony between the sexes. It destroys the natural chemistry and attraction between man and woman, which again destroys the family, which again serves the same agenda. So all of these kind of separate, they seem like separate things going on. It's really not that complicated. It's just people at the top, you could say social engineers, trying to secure more power for the already powerful by creating disharmony and disempowerment. So that's the main insight that needs a lot more emphasis. One of the main insights that needs a lot more emphasis is that this is a power play by the same narcissistic, abusive rulers that have existed, for generations. And speaking of history, going back in time, Jesus is said to have said to turn the other cheek. So in what's called his Sermon on the Mount, it's translated into English that if someone slaps you on one cheek, turn the other cheek. Invite the person who just hit you on the face to hit the other side too. And then the next verse says, if someone steals your coat, basically, or cloak or tunic, if someone steals an article of your clothing right off your back, offer him another one. If they steal your jacket, give them your shirt also. So these are words attributed to Jesus, which are false. They are not what he actually said. And they should strike anyone, no pun intended on the word strike there, that it seems odd that Jesus would support the idea of accepting abuse, right? Because if someone's hitting you and then you just invite them to hit you some more, we wouldn't call that good practical advice, in any other context, right? If someone is in an abusive relationship, you're not going to hear a counselor say, oh, you know what you should do next time this person hits you is, invite them to hit you some more, right? It would be considered ridiculous advice. And so to assume that Jesus actually said this is, I would say, borderline blasphemous, because it's so absurd. You would have to it's projecting onto Jesus this absurdity, this absurd view, this pro-abuse view, which also doesn't fit his main teaching in his ministry, which is teaching on love, loving God, loving others, and loving yourself, right? And abuse is the actual opposite of love, of a befriending action. So why would he preach love as his main focus, and then in these couple of verses preach the exact opposite, right? It's an inconsistency. And when you find something as glaring as that is, inconsistency wise, that should lead you to question whether it's correct, right? Whether there's been a mistake or in a translation, or if there's been a purposeful changing of the words. So I'm going to attempt to demonstrate exactly how that was done with the verse on supposedly turning the other cheek. So this verse can be found in Matthew 5:39 and Luke 6:29. And if you look in what's called the Strong's Concordance, it's a reference book, which you can, of course, now find online, which gives you definitions in Greek, shows you the original Greek word, and then gives you, meanings that can be valid definitions for each of these words, right? So if someone strikes you on one cheek, turn to them the other is how it's translated in most, English Bibles. So let's look at these words in the Greek, right? So the first one is, and never mind my pronunciation, I'm going to spell the words. Obviously, I don't know how to pronounce these words in Greek perfectly or at all how to pronounce them, but I'll spell them, and I'll give you the number of the word in the Strong's Concordance, so you can look these up yourself. So the first word is tupto, T-U-P-T-O. It's number 5180. And this is translated correctly. It's a verb that means to strike. So it's oftentimes translated as slap, but really, which is close, but really it's strike. So hit or strike. The next word is su, S-U, 4771, a personal pronoun meaning you. So also, so far, so good for the most part. Strike you, if someone strikes you. The next word is epi, E-P-I, 1909. This can be translated as on or against. So if someone strikes you against or strikes you on. The next word is ho or hey, which is simply the. And next word is what looks like Saigon, S-I-A-G-O-N. It's word number 4600. And this actually, the correct translation is jaw or jawbone. So just to reiterate where we're at so far, we have strike you against the jaw. Okay. Now the next word is parecho, P-A-R-E-C-H-O, which is number 3930. And this means give, basically give. So we again have strike you against the jaw, give, and then the next word here, which is really the one that needs the focus, is number 243, allos, A-L-L-O-S, which means another, but more specifically, of more than two. So in the Strong's Concordance, it points out that a valid translation is another, and then in parentheses they say of more than two. So it's one of the same kind. It's another of the same kind, right? Someone has struck you on the jaw, someone hit you on the jaw, and so another is going to be one of the same kind. It's going to be another strike on the jaw. And then the final word is kai, K-A-I, number 2532, which a valid translation of is likewise. So it's these final two words that have been purposely, I believe, deceivingly translated to take away the true meaning of what Jesus was saying. He was saying, if someone strikes you on the jaw, give them another of like kind. Give them another likewise. So, meaning you hit them on the jaw back. And this actually fits the context of what he was talking about regarding, the moral law, where he said, I haven't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill it, to refine it. And that's what he showed us with the greatest commandments. That's what he showed us when he was talking about, even to hold anger is sinful. He was refining the moral law for us. He wasn't destroying it. He was refining it. And so when, in the context, you have heard them say an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And then he says, but I say to you, even if they strike you on the jaw, even if it's just someone hits you on the jaw, well, return to them likewise one of the same. So he's saying even that lesser form of abuse you should use defensive force against, because that's actually fitting with the commandments to love yourself. So by changing the meaning of those words deceptively, they are portraying Jesus as someone who is this ultimate pacifist and is actually pro-abuse, which is exactly what the powers that be would want, which is exactly what abusive rulers would want you to believe, right? Because they're abusive. So again, if they can get you to think that defensive force is a bad thing and that you're actually following the Messiah's direct accept abuse, well, that's perfect for these abusive rulers, right? Because again, the population is going to be much more easily controllable. They're not going to fight back, right? So the same goes true for the next verse. So that's Matthew 5:39 or Luke 6:29, the supposed, turn the other cheek, which is Jesus actually saying, if someone strikes you on one jaw, return to them another of the same kind. Return to them another likewise. And in the next verse, it's referring to if someone supposedly takes your cloak, takes your jacket, takes, to use modern terms here, someone takes your jacket, give them your shirt also. Again, if you analyze the Greek, that's not what he was saying. He wasn't saying if someone takes it from you. He said if someone asks it of you. So he's referring to like something that you're probably familiar with, which is just like a charitable act, right? Like if say you're driving down the road and it's cold outside and you see someone like walking down the road shivering, right? Like they only got like a tank top on and some shorts, but it's like, it's really cold outside. And, as you're at a stop sign or something and they just wave at you and they say, oh, excuse me, would you happen to have like any extra jacket or something, anything that I can wear? Well, Jesus is saying if they ask you for, say they say, oh, do you just happen to have an extra shirt, right? They just asked you, I'm pretty cold here. Maybe if you had just an extra t-shirt, I could put that on. He's saying, not only give them the shirt, but give them your jacket too, give them something. And people do this. Like you've probably done something like that before. I think I probably have in the past, where when someone is in a state of need and they ask for something minimal, right? Like they make a minimal request, a minimal charitable request. It's like a hungry person. If a hungry person says, could I just have like, one loaf of bread? The idea is not only give them the loaf of bread, but give them, like a basket of fruit too, like be extra loving to them because they're in a state of need. So what they've done is they've changed the word from if someone asks you for a shirt to if someone takes the shirt. And so that totally changes the meaning, because now the person that you're giving the shirt and jacket to is actually an abuser, and you're accepting the abuse, just like in the previous verse, they twisted the words to be this acceptance of abuse. And, in modern Bible translations, they'll have, Luke 6:30 read as, if anyone takes what's yours, do not demand it back. So they're saying if someone steals your stuff, well, that's okay. Actually offer them some more. And you'll come across the most ridiculous rationalizations, across the board, various ridiculous rationalizations to try and make sense of this. But there is no sense to be made from it. It's just a mistranslation, which I think is purposeful again, because it fits this acceptance of abuse agenda, which abusive controllers have wanted people to accept for centuries. So it's the emasculation agenda that we see, hyper accelerated today, having been gone on for thousands of years. And by, you could say, emasculating the message of Jesus, it's unfortunately turned many men into these pacifists that just accept abuse and think it's actually a holy thing, when in fact it's not at all. And like I said in my previous talk on the verse about Jesus saying, many will come to me and say, we called you Lord, and we worshipped you, and he's going to say, actually, I never knew you. You were practitioners of lawlessness. You're evildoers, right? Like you actually haven't been doing what I taught at all. And again, that's in large part due to people ignoring the teachings of his that have remained uncorrupted, mainly the greatest commandments, as a core teaching, along with accepting omissions about, the history of the early Christians and disciples, as you can read about in books like The Lost Religion of Jesus. So people have been deceived into accepting abuse on multiple fronts. And that's fundamentally the dynamic, because God is a God of love. The Messiah, his message was one of love. And the enemy, the adversary of God, is pushing the complete opposite, which is abuse. So that's why you have them trying to convince you that Jesus didn't care about animals at all. Jesus was totally fine with governments. He was, endorsed all governments for all time. And that, if someone hits you, you should just let them keep hitting you. And if they steal your stuff, you should just let them take even more, right? They've totally inverted his teachings, right? Which is satanic, right? It's the inversion of the good to evil. And through these two verses, Matthew 5:39, 5:40, also found in Luke 6:29 and 6:30 again, they've managed to hoodwink and deceive, countless billions of men for centuries now into believing that defensive force is actually a bad thing and accepting abuse is a good thing. So I hope you found this insightful, and thank you for listening.